Do you have comments on your assignments that say things like, "Ooh, you've used too much complex jargon. Ooh, but write it simply. Ooh, but it's for an academic audience. But also pretend they don't know anything about the topic." Because fucking same, guys. And it used to melt my brain. But now as a teacher, I'm just like, oh, it's confusing as heck. Whew. So when we get comments that say things like, use simple or plain language, I used to think that we were talking about using colloquial or informal language, like everyday talk. That's not what they mean. What they were talking about was academic tone. When you're using academic tone, you're writing professionally, but you're writing precisely and clearly. You can still use like simple language, like discuss. So you wouldn't say talk, that's too colloquial, but you could say discuss. Still be professional. So it wouldn't be too many words. It would just be cute. So something I like to think about, this might be helpful for you. Some of my students said it helps them, but they could be liars, so who knows, because they're trying to get my good books. Is I like to imagine that I'm a doctor or a psychiatrist or something like a rocket scientist, something like that, and I have this very important thing that only I've seen, and I have to communicate that in written form to the next person, and all they're going to know about it is what I've told them. So if I was to be writing something about, like in one of those situations, I would want it clear, I would want it precise. I wouldn't write anything about how I'm feeling about it, no, because that's not important. And if I was going to include terminology, it would be only the key stuff, because I wouldn't want them making mistakes, because there could be big, dangerous consequences. Big, dangerous, that wasn't very academic, was it? So maybe imagine that you are the person carrying some information to somebody else. The other thing that can be a little bit confusing is when we're told to write as if there's an academic audience, but at the same time, pretend they don't know anything about the topic. Like, what? But they're an academic audience, doesn't make any sense. What I used to do, and again, what I've been telling my students to do, is instead of pretending they don't know anything, or that they're just like this academic audience who's just gonna be like, yes, I 100% agree, yes, I like to imagine that they're an absolute arsehole, they're really smart, and they don't think that we know anything. And you're going to be proving them wrong. So if you're going to be including terms, you're going to be like taking a lot of time to decide what terms you're going to be using, potentially defining or explaining them if it's appropriate. You're going to be proving that you've chosen these things correctly. Prove it to the marker that you know what you're talking about. That's what comes across as clever, okay? So some things to watch out for in your assignments that can really impact academic tone are things that are using words that are too informal. So basically like, think, talk, these kinds of things. Writing that's too long, so you've just kind of like talked for too long, guilty. Guilty as charged. You tried to over-explain something. When we over-explain things, we can accidentally kind of like go off on tangents and stuff, and the reader is just like, whoa, and they've got to try and, sustain their attention the whole time through that. It's a bit like, what's going on? Why are they over-explaining? And they can miss bits, it's just confusing. Precision, don't include things that aren't necessary, guys. Make sure you're being very precise in your selection of information. And try not to be using too much personal tone in there as well. So you want to be impersonal. So if you're thinking about that Dr. Rocket situation I just mentioned before, don't be throwing in your feelings. It can be as simple as not using emotive language as well. So I've read a lot of assignments like this, including my own when I look back, that would say things like, oh, this researcher had a very surprising take on this finding, blah, blah, blah. While ludicrous, they do have some good points. But see, all these words, it sounds like I'm personally offended. Why am I offended? Why am I offended? We don't need that. This person said this about it. This other person critiqued it by saying this. Overall, considering that in this critique, it means this. Okay, so know me, just these are the facts, my friend. Science, 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 science. Okay. It is a fine line between getting comments that say you're using too much informal language and then getting comments that say you're using too much complicated scientific jargon. So I've prepared an example for you. I went through one of my old assignments and just to see what I'd done, and somehow I'd both done things too complicated and overly informal. My assignment was about depression, so the example is about depression. So someone who might say something like, I'm just going to read this off my screen because I tried to do it in my own head before and it didn't go very well. So this is too informal. People going through depression, they find it hard to talk about how they feel because they think others won't understand. So there's some really good stuff in there, but did you hear they think other people won't understand? It's hard to talk about how they feel. Not ideal, okay? A really overcomplicated version of this would be something like, again, reading off my screen, individuals manifesting depressive symptomology often experience hesitancy in confiding in others as they apprehend a lack of empathy and cognitive resonance. This is technically correct, but if I was to read this in an assignment, I'd have to read the sentence over and over and over again to be like, whoa, hold on one sec, what are we talking about? But I'd also wonder if that person actually understands what they're talking about. It's much easier to throw in big words than it is to explain something with an academic tone, okay? What we might be looking for though would be something, so using that informal one, might be individuals exhibiting symptoms of depression frequently or often encounter challenges when socializing, as they've reported feeling or have expressed feelings really hard on the fly to do. Or even it could be like individuals exhibiting symptoms of depression frequently encounter challenges when expressing their emotional states to others. This reluctance may stem from a perceived lack of understanding or shared experience with it, like with these people. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it can be really, you can already see it now. It's easy to do it complicated and it's easy to do it simple. It's that midline that we want, okay? So even begin with things that are simple. So if you're talking about the word talk, instead of talk, discuss, you know? This author talked about this, they discussed it. They didn't say it, they discussed it. They stated it, they indicated that, okay? With research, this was one I was so guilty of. Instead of saying something like, these findings found or these findings mean, these findings indicate, these findings suggest, these findings lend support to, these findings contradict that. Ooh, sexy, right? You know, we don't have to say talk, we don't have to say found. If you can say, like found's not wrong, but like it's just, you know, it sounds sexier if we don't say found. What was another really sexy one I found the other day? Nah, it's gone. Well, I hope this was helpful, guys. Hopefully my brain returns to its skull. Marking has melted my mind. But for now, that's what I've got. If you've got any more questions or I think about a better way to do this, I will do it. But if you've got questions, ask. That was also confusing. I'm so sorry. Bye.